All right, so here we are in After Effects. We're going to go ahead and import our EXR that we rendered out of C4D and Redshift. Got that guy here. Let's go ahead and make a new comp. Make sure we're in 32-bit. All right, so the first thing we'll do is go to Effect, 3D Channel, and hit Extractor. And immediately everything is going to get super dark because the beauty that we're pulling out of our EXR is in linear color space. There are a couple of ways that we can deal with working in linear. And the first is, you can go to working space, set that to sRGB, and linearize your working space. But I actually prefer to, at the top of my comp, just set a adjustment layer up and call it color space. And we'll just apply the color profile converter to that layer, which is sitting up at the top. And so we'll say input profile. We want to linearize the input profile, and our output, we want to be sRGB. I personally prefer to work this way as it is less prone to human error at render time. So let's call our first layer down here beauty. And let's see how we can use some of those AOVs. So kind of immediately, one of the first things I want to do is give a little bit more variation to the lighting in our background. So let's go ahead and dig out our background, which we stored in the puzzle mat. We'll call this layer background mat. And so now we're going to be looking for our puzzle mat. So if we click on Extractor and grab our puzzle mat, we want the red channel in each red, blue, and green. And that's going to give us a black and white mat to use as a mask. Now, just for demonstration purposes, let's also just take a look at what happens when we set red to puzzle mat red, green to puzzle mat green, and blue to puzzle mat blue. You'll see we actually get our puzzle mat as we saw it in C4D. And we're simply using either the red or the green to make our selection right now. So delete that layer, and let's add another adjustment layer. And we'll call this background vignette. And we'll grab a color correct, and let's just grab curves. And we're going to set this curves adjustment layer to Luma Matte for our background mat. So now we're using this to mask off where we're going to apply our color correction. So you see if I bring this down or up, we're simply adjusting the color there. So I think I'm going to give this guy a bit of some contrast, maybe a little more contrast than I'd like, and give it a big ol' ellipse matte as well. And we'll just go ahead and invert it and give it a bit of a feather. All right. So now if I flip this on and off, you can see we're kind of just vignetting our background a little bit. Maybe we'll dial that down to 75%, or maybe 50%. Yeah, there we go. So what else have we got to play with? We have our Fresnel. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. We'll grab our extractor plugin and say Fabric Fresnel. So we've got this guy. We'll go ahead and switch its layer to add. And we'll see that it's probably a little much there. But we can go ahead and add a curves onto this as well. Kind of just dial in. Kind of like what it's doing under here. So just maybe dial that in just a tiny bit. There we go. And as well, I think I'd like to add a little bit more of that fill light from the left. So we'll just duplicate our beauty again, stick it up at the top. Let's go ahead and make sure to label our Fresnel layer. So we'll just say add Fresnel. Why don't we grab our beauty left fill AOV, and we'll also go ahead and set this to add on top. And just as I turn it on and off, we can see the contribution of that left I think I kind of really only want it in this area though, so maybe we'll just add a quick mask to that. Hit F for feather. Kind of feather that guy out a bit. We'll say add left fill. And we can dial that in as we please as well. Somewhere right about there. And I'm also noticing I kind of maybe want to increase the contrast of this soft satin looking material on our fabric. So why don't we go ahead and grab our background mat, which has the puzzle mat in it. We'll take a look at that for a second, and we'll just flip these to puzzle mat green, which has our cloth selection. So we'll call this cloth mat. But actually, we don't want the whole cloth. We want just that fabric selection for the soft looking material. So actually, the one we want is the custom AOV we called fabric material picker. And just to remind us what that is, we have that rubbery material that was on the edges in green, and in red we have the soft satin material. So let's go ahead and pick the red channel for each one of these. And now we have just the selection for the soft satin. So if I go ahead and add another adjustment layer, we'll drop that down below our cloth mat and give it a Luma mat. And we'll call this contrast soft cloth. And let's go ahead and just add another color correction, curves. Now you'll see we're able to adjust only just that soft material. So maybe I want to add a little bit more brightness, but also sort of darken the shadows a bit. So we'll just kind of play around with our lighting here till we get what we want. There we go, that's looking pretty nice. So while we're at it, why don't we go ahead and add some depth of field as well. We'll add another adjustment layer and call this depth of field. Drop it below our color space. And we're going to duplicate our layer and pull out normalized depth pass. So what we want to do is set actually red, green, and blue to our depth alpha. Hit OK. If we take a look at it, we can see, we're getting our depth range here. We'll keep this guy down at the bottom of the stack and call it Z depth. And what we're going to do is take our depth of field layer, add a camera lens blur, make sure we hit repeat edge pixels. And for blur map, we're going to use Z depth. In this case, we want to make sure you use linear working spaces on, because this Z depth pass is coming in as linear. And if I flip down the blur focal distance, looks like in this case, when I get up to about 0.5, we reach infinite focus, maybe 0.7. So somewhere along there, if I just kind of slide forward and back, you can see as I slide right up to about 0.4, our background wall is in focus. It looks like right around 0.2, we've got our main piece of fabric in focus. So maybe we'll just increase our blur radius for a second. Actually, it looks like about a 0.1, our main piece of cloth is in focus. So I walk our depth of field up a little bit. You can see our background's really out of focus now. Kind of looks not very real. So we'll just keep the blur radius at 5. After Effects built-in camera lens blur is not exactly the best depth of field application out there, but certainly works in this case. It's a pretty simple scene. Now if I just duplicate my beauty and pop it up top, I just call this comparison. If I flip my comparison on and off, you can see We've actually done quite a bit of work on this guy just from the AOVs that we've kicked out. And honestly, this is just barely scratching the surface. I'd highly recommend that you take a look at some of the other AOVs that are available and see which ones are useful for you. But you can clearly see that, being able to adjust these things in comp can be really strong. So I hope this section has been helpful and gives you a reason to take a look at actually the additional creative decisions that you can make in comp. Thanks for checking out the AOV section, and we'll see you in the next one.